Hello, good morning, everyone. So my name is Aaryan Dubey, and I'm going to present the paper on semantic reconstruction of continuous language from non-invasive brain recording. So generally, let me introduce like what this paper is all about. So it's generally the study that introduces a non-invasive brain-computer interface that can decode continuous language from our cortical semantic representation through some fMRI. So generally, our brain tries to map different areas of map, try to click some color based or some electrical signal, blood based electrical signal. Whenever we try to communicate something, even if I'm thinking right now, there might be some sequence going around in my brain. So this particular algorithm tries to do is that is going to detect those blood samples or the blood magnetic waves in your brain, and then it's going to produce a particular language. Like, okay, what I'm thinking, it can go say, okay, this particular electrical response in your brain represent that you are presenting a paper. So something like that. So the interface can generate intangible word sequence that can recover the meaning of received speech, imagined speech, and even silent videos. That means if I'm watching a video right now, so if I won't be saying anything, right? My brain will generate some electrical impulse and it will go to the model. And after that, model will generate things, okay, the whole script of the video that I'm watching. So something like that. So what they tend to do is that they tested decoder across different cortical regions, showing that continuous language can be separately decoded from multiple areas. That means our brain is represented in different ways, right? Right part, left part, everyone has different things. Like we have speech recognition inside the brain, PF, perfectual cortex, something like that. So it tries to do, okay, if one part of the brain triggers, what will the sequence will come? What is the second part of the brain triggers? What the sequence will come? Something like that. These findings demonstrate the potential of non-invasive language into brain-computer interface. So if I move forward towards it, it generates some history, right? So previous brain-computer interface for speech restoration requires invasive neurosurgery. That means they have to put some devices in your brain and try to do something. Then only you can get that particular output. So non-invasive language decoders have potential for wider use, but previous attempts have been limited to identifying one output from a small set of probability. It is unclear whether the non-invasive recordings have the necessary solutions to decode continuous language. So what is there in this algorithm? So simple. They have a decoder. Input, they take non-invasive brain recordings made using functional magnetic resonance imaging. It's a particular algorithm that they use in medical field to map out the whole brain. The output that decoder gives is a reconstructive, perceived, or imagined stimuli uses continuous language. The study faced challenge because brain response measured by fMRI is slow, taking about 10 seconds to change. This means that brain image can be affected by many words. To overcome this, decoder generate different word opinion, then select the best opinion based on how likely it is to match the brain response that was recorded. So that means if we come to this image right now, you can see this particular language model generate four proposed continuation for I saw a dog, I saw a big dog, I saw a big truck, I saw a big dog, and I saw a big dog with. So there's an encoding model, right? Encoding model is generated by linear regression method that they defined. And after that, this will convert it into a predictions. That means the prediction in which brain is there. So to generally calculate the likelihood of how it is, like which of these predictions are best, and it will move forward towards this continuous training loop again and again. So that's what it's saying. Then it selects the best opinion based on how likely is to match the brain response for that was recorded. Here, I think the best record is the first one. That means I saw a dog with, or something like that. So a question. How to compare word sequence to subject's brain response, right? So it says that encode model that predicts the subject brain response to the natural language. That means what they tend to do is that here in this diagram, you can see, this is our brain, right? Blue, yellow, purple are our different responses from the brain for a particular word. For now, word is I grew up in a really, right? So we have a noise in our brain. That means this particular color sequence have been transformed into some noise. They extract some features. They extracted around 3,000 features for one particular person. And after that, they encode it in this and they produce an encoding model. They tend to say that a linear regression model and they train it like this. And after that, it has this particular prediction like this. Same encoding model is gone here. So that means if a language model produces some continuation, this encoding model will produce the prediction. So they tried to train this model, and they got results something like this. So blue one represent, that means the feelings of the words are exactly same, just means it's in the middle. Error means, yeah, it's bad. So let's look at the first word that it's not like all the words were good. In this paper, they say that we pick some of the few examples and presented it here. So right now, let's just say this is the original response. I got up from the air mattress and pressed my face against the glass of the bedroom window, expecting to see the eye staring back at me, but instead finding only darkness. Then if we go there in the decoded stimulus, it would be like, I just continued to walk up to the window. That means window is there. So it's killing, okay, blue, and open. It never opened the window. But here they say that open the glass and stood my toes and peered out and didn't see anything. Here the feeling of the words are same, but the words are different, and looked up and I saw nothing. That means there are some words that are not really 100% sure, but there are some words, the feelings are typically same, but there are also some words that are 100% same. After in the paper, we'll see why these type of things happen. So let's go back to the Word document that we have right now. So we record the brain response while the subject listened to 16 hours of natural spoken narratives, yielding over 5 times more data than typical experiment with fMRI that we currently used to have in the past. They extract semantic features that captures the meaning of the stimulus phase. Semantic features generally, they didn't define more about semantic features in this whole algorithm. They just say that we are extracting semantic features. There are around 3,000 semantic features, and they move forward towards it. As I was saying, they use linear regression model to show how the semantic features influence the brain response. We could identify the most likely stimulus word by comparing the recorded brain response to the encoding of the model prediction for every possible word sequence. That is not practical. So they use a beam search algorithm. That is in this whole algorithm language model, they use the beam search algorithm, which generate candidate sequence word by word, maintaining a beam of k most likely candidate at each particular step. The language module generate continuous for each sequence in the beam. That means something like this. I saw a dog with T1 was candidate, will go again here. I saw a dog with a person. It will again go here, and it will again go here. The cycle will goes on and on. So that's what I'm saying. Language model generate continuous for each sequence of beam, and the encoding model scores the likelihood that each continuation evoke the recorded brain response, as I'm saying here. This particular, I saw a dog, and what brain response does it trigger? So it will take that likelihood. And the k most likely continuous are retained in the beam for the next step and approximating the most likely stimulus word over time. That means these two are going, these two are not going right now. So for this, what this is showing the results are the 3 individual subjects were trained with the decoder. That means 3 individual person. And we have to notice that for every particular individual, the model was different. That means they are not using the same model for like, okay, 3 particular subjects. For every particular individual subjects, model are trained differently. It captured not only the meaning of the stimuli, but often even the exact word and phrases, as I told you earlier. The window, like scream and cry. Here you can see, I don't know whether to scream or cry or run away. Instead, I said, leave me alone. I don't need your help, Adam, and disappeared. I cleaned up alone crying. So here there is word scream and cry. So he decoded it and said, scream and cry, leave me alone. There's a word, leave me alone. Leave me alone here. So yeah, that's how they try to decode the results right now. So now, the other thing that I was talking about, decoding across cortical regions. That means if I come down here, this is our brain, right? Our brain, it tries to divide the brain into 3 parts. Speech part, association part, and prefrontal part. That means if I'm trying to speak something, one part of my brain will be triggered. It could be prefrontal, it could be association, it could be speech, right? So if I'm saying right now what I'm saying right now, it could come from my speech, association, or prefrontal, or my thought process could go from prefrontal, association, speech in the end, right? Speech is only triggered when I'm trying to say something, right? If I'm thinking, speech won't be triggered that much. Only prefrontal and association will be triggered. But yeah, let me explain more in this. Simple. How does each part of the brain helps in creating that stimuli response. That means the response which you saw here. Let's just say I got up from the air mattress. How does this response occurs from each part of the brain? We are going to see that. So they say that we partition the brain data into 3 macro scale cortical regions. The parent and temporal occupation association region, this one, that is the green region of the brain, the prefrontal region, the prefrontal, that is the blue, and the speech network, that is in yellow, separately decoded from each region in the each hemisphere. So decoder produces interval word sequence. We can directly access how precise each region represents the stimulus words. So we can know, okay, these blue regions, how does it, if we trigger that, how does that particular sequence of word will come into play? So after a few tests, we don't know whether the region is constantly engaged through stimulus or only active at certain times. They didn't know that after the test. To identify the regions that are constantly engaged in language processing, we next computed the fraction of time points that was significantly decoded from each region. That means for the first, they try to see, okay, let's go. I think, yeah, this is the best response here. They try to do something like this. This is the actual stimuli. Just to remind you, the purple one is the gist. That means the model is almost the same as the good response. Blue one is like it's the perfect response, and red one, that means not producing anything. So if the actual stimulus is like this, I was like, no, I'm out of here. This is great. And I went and hide behind a cabana and I left, right? Then if we go for the left speech part, that means the speech part of the brain, that is from the left part of the brain. It will produce stimulus something like this. They drove off, they didn't even look back, and I sat there thinking, what the hell would I do? So this and this part are somehow associated. And I believe if I go here, I drew out this map. And if I go to the right associated part of the brain, it's like write down how many miles per hour you are traveling to the closest city. I drew out this map for you, and you are really like a mile and a half from home. So it's producing the same results as what we have in the actual stimuli. And it also says that if you look at this diagram, individually they are not going to produce more, but if they combine their response with different part of the brain, that means if speech and prefrontal works together, it will produce a more better stimuli instead of going for the one part of the brain. So let's just see. They found out that the association in prefrontal region consistently represent the meaning of the words and phrases in language, while only a smaller portion of the time points could be decoded from the speech network. What they're saying is that in this particular diagram, they're saying that when we see the time for that particular response, right, we were seeing time for how much time speech, if I go here, how much time the speech was active, how much time was association was active, how much time was prefrontal was active. So they say that speech wasn't active much as compared to prefrontal and association part of the network, because speech network represent lower level auditory and auditory features. That means if I'm sitting quietly and thinking about some stuff, my speech won't work because that's more of a low level auditory and auditory features. So that's why speech is not triggered, man. That's their theory right now. So they also assess the relationship between language representation encoded in different groups. So that means, let's just say, if I produce something like this, I was like, no, I'm out of here. This is great. And I went to hid behind a cabana and he left. They're saying that we tried to analyze how each part of the brain produces this language, right? What I told you earlier. They also say that different part of the brain produces redundant language. They found that decoded word sequence from different region and hemisphere was significantly more similar than expected by chance, indicating that different cortical regions encode redundant word language representation. However, the same words could be encoded in different regions using different features, which is still an open question for further research. So they are saying that it is possible if you try to study only one part of the brain and it could produce more better results. But right now, all three parts work together and try to produce the best possible result that we could have. So that's the basic idea of what they defined here, decoding across cortical regions of the brain. Now we go to the decoder application and privacy implication. This is the goodest part, best part of the paper, I'd say. So they say that language decoder trained on brain responses to perceive speech could be used to decode brain responses on the other tasks. First task, I would say here, let me just do this. Decoder application from privacy implication. First part, they say that imagine speech decoding. So what they're saying here is that if I'm sitting right here, right, I imagine something, right? I imagine winning your Oscar, right? Let's just say I imagine something like this. So if a model is on my brain right now, it will decode it something like this. Okay, he is thinking of winning an Oscar, something like that. But the key here is that model failed on imagine speech decoding. The key task for the brain-computer interface is decoding covered imagined speech in the absence of external stimuli. They say that they imagine subject telling 5 1-minute stories and while recorded by fMRI. They separately told the same stories. And they compare the same stories with the transcript. That means you're telling me a story, right? And you have a transcript. Then the whole particular this model will produce a external stimuli or the language that is currently producing, and we'll compare it with the transcript and see, okay, how much it is matching. But in the imagine speech decoding, they say that it didn't perform well. As you can see here, here in the diagram 3b, they say that this is the reference word and this is the decoded part. It didn't perform well, but this is the best part, I would say. So this is the where we put the image, right? Means I'm sitting right here and they show me a silent movie, right? This is a silent movie. There's a girl and there's an animal or dragon, something like that, and she's trying to heal her, right? This is the actual stimuli that we are showing. After that, the model decoded by taking the brain response was that she was very weak. I held her neck to get her breathing under control. I see a girl that looked just like me and get hit on her back, and then she is knocked off. It took into this, and they have a particular video for this too. I'll show you after the end of the presentation, I believe, where they run this whole video and the real-time decoding of the brain response goes on in this video right now. So I'll close the figure right now. So another one is cross-modal decoding. So they say that semantic subject was 4 short films without sound while being recorded with fMRI. The recorded response were decoded using Semantic language decoder. It was compared with the transcript of the movie. This is what I showed you guys, where it was trained on, for 16 minutes. Then they go and look at the videos and see the whole decoded one. So after that, we go to the attention effects on the decoding. So decoder that was used in the study can reconstruct word based on brain activity, right? So attention or focusing on specific things. That means, if I'm sitting here, there are 2 videos going on towards me, right? One video is recited by a male person, one video is recited by a female person, right? And they both are different videos. So right now, for the first, I was going to attend to a male attentive, right? So they say, okay, try to focus on male, what he's trying to say. So I focus there, and the female voice is also going through my ears. But if I'm focused on male person speaking the words or the particular speech or something like that, my whole brain response will be based on that. That means my brain response won't be affected by any other thing if my attention is towards a particular person. If the same has happened to the female, the result was same. So it doesn't affect anything. It's just our brain, if you are focused on one thing, the other external stimuli won't affect our brain response like that. That's what they are saying. Attention or focusing on specific thing affects how brain processes information. To test this, subject listened to 2 stories told by different speakers and were cued to pay attention to one of them. Decoder was better at reconstructing the story that the subject was paying attention to. This shows that decoder can only reconstruct what subject is actively paying attention to right now. And after that, you guys must be thinking like, yeah, there might be some privacy implication, right? So they try to attempt to decode perceptive speech from each subject using decoder trained on data from other subjects. So let's just say the decoder was trained on me, right? And if any of you try to test the decoder, it will fail, because that decoder will be particularly trained on my thought process, my brain power, my brain stimuli, something like that. That's what they are saying. So if a particular person is thinking, okay, if I trained a decoder on some great person, but it will not work on any other person, it will be only work on that. But I think it's still pretty cool, because if that particular decoder could work on you and you can train it to a certain extent, it will be pretty cool. I don't know. Any questions till now? Any thoughts?
I think you can continue, but really interesting, really interesting. I think
No,
all
this thing
this
about
part, like the network specifically for every person and stuff like that. Victor, you can talk.
yeah, no, I was just thinking that would be very interesting, like if it works specifically for every person, but there are, for example, it works specifically for every person, like cortical issues and more high-level logical language issues. But the deeper you go, see, for example, they find a pattern, the deeper you go, and that kind of thing, you kind of find commonalities in the brain and lower and more basal brain functions and not just cortical and language-based, That'd be pretty interesting if they could.
The funny thing in this paper that I saw is that they trained it on GPT-1.
Yes, yeah, that's the thing I was going to add, right? Because they don't put that on the main part of the paper, but then in the end, like which language model, and they're like, it's GPT-1 is like
GPT-1,
like it's kind of like worse, not superior, but then BERT, that was the first big model, and that was the thing. I was like, what if the guys use the embeddings or like the stuff like that from like the GPT models or even more advanced models? Because I think. Yeah, and I think this is also is interesting, the part that now I think you're going to talk, right? Because you talk about these testings, but then like now is the part of the paper that they go to the sources of decoding error, right? They see like all the noise and stuff like that. And one thing I was thinking is like that, like, oh, maybe if they use more advanced models, maybe the encoding and decoding part from the language model would improve as well, because maybe it would be not, I mean, kind of like less noisy in the sense that the model is able to absorb more knowledge, right? So maybe the things that they use could use more on that side. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, my basic idea was put GPT-4 and let's see what it produces, right?
Yeah.
What it can produce, because GPT-1 they are performing so good, then
Yeah, and the results, like I think, like of course they are not perfect, but I think it's really interesting, right? I think the author is going. I think you can continue your presentation, but at the end of the paper about this kind of stuff, like using like non-invasive, right? You can kind of see what the guy is thinking and convert that to natural language. Maybe like in the future, like you have very interesting or terrifying things depending on which side of the technology, the technology is used, right?
Imagine this on Neuralink.
Yeah. Or imagine this is like the I don't know, a bad guy wants to know like what you're thinking, like wrong, like 1984, like, oh, it's wrong thought, like I don't know the term, like they translated the original term, but like, yeah, you're not thinking about the things that you should think, stuff like that,
but imagine running this on someone you train the model and then the person goes in a coma. That would be really fascinating.
Yes, the change. Yeah, and also this thing as well, right? And also we could think about, like a long-term experiment, like, so how the brain changes, something like that. Because will the encoder, like the experiment show that the encoder works for each person, right? So like a person like 15 years old, like if they are 20, like the encoding would work similar or would be totally different, right? Maybe it could be somewhat like even to understand like the links in the brain, something like that. I think it has lots of interesting applications.
Yeah, like for example, also if you're like, for example, if you're studying one specific person and that person has a stroke and becomes aphasic, for example, loses language capabilities, loses sight for some connection reason. Could you theoretically predict what that person would be seeing? For example, the signal is interrupted halfway, so the person can't. So there are some diseases where, for example, you cut, the person can see perfectly, but their brain can't really process the visual information. So she doesn't have a representation. But if you throw something at the person recoils and dodges, right? It's called blindside, and there are a few examples of this. So if you have a model that reconstructs images or reconstructs language in the case of aphasias for someone who just interrupted the final stage of the process, could you project or maybe help that person see again, put that on a screen, that kind of thing for images or language? The person can't really complete phrases, but she has perfect understanding. could you complete the phrases for her and speak for her, right? So she understands, but she can't speak. Because there are a few pathways that when you have a stroke are completely interrupted. And they study that from the point of view of neurology and just like how brains work in general. If you could complete those pathways with deep learning, that would be amazing.
I think this has that particular idea, because they say that they haven't trained much on speech. But yeah, if they try to, initialize that model on that particular area only, yeah, it could produce good results in my opinion.
Yeah, they compare like the several areas of the brain. So yeah. Yeah, I think maybe you can continue.
Yeah, let's get
and then you finish and then we continue the discussion.
Yeah. So in the end, it's just say that the source of decoding errors, right? Simple errors. So they say that researcher wanted to find out whether the limitation of decoding language from brain actively using fMRI were due to the quality of fMRI recording or the size of the dataset used to train the model. They found that the low signal noise ratio of MRI recordings can limit the amount of information that can be decoded. They say that by increasing the size of the training dataset, they were able to reduce the effect of noise in the data and improve the decoding performance with diminishing returns for each successive scanning session. They also found that artificially increasing SNR by averaging brain response collected during different repeats of the test story slightly improved the decoding performance. I think we have something like this here. If I zoom in a little bit, they say that, yeah, if you increase the training session, the story similarity mean increases by a lot if you go from the starting point. Here, story similarity, if the test repeats over time, it varied a little bit, but still it goes on a particular end. They also say that, like this particular thing, word decoding score, that means for a particular word, let's just say, I'm taking an example, school here. So to get that particular feature for that particular word, school, could be difficult for model at some extent. So that means its decoding error increase with if the words are a little bit typical or it cannot get that particular feeling out of that word, or a non-invasive feeling or whatever it's called right now. It cannot get out, so model will not perform well in this decoding part. So just in the end, 3 human subjects had 16 hours of thought process recorded and listed to narrative stories. Then these were trained with custom GPT LLM to map the specific part of the stimuli to the words. GPT is the first one we have to keep in mind. Results. So GPT model generated intelligible word sequence for the perceived speech, imagined speech, and even silent videos recommended accuracy. This is some accuracy that I found. The AI model could decipher both meaning and the stimuli of specific word subject through ranging phrases like lay down on the floor, leave me alone, to scream and cry. We saw the scream and cry example in that left and right part of the stimuli of the brain. They found that you need to train a model on particular person thoughts. So there is no generalizable model able to decode thoughts in general. So, but yeah, they always say that future decoders could overcome this limitation. But yeah, this is it. This was the paper simple go through. I think I can find a video here. Yeah. Let's play the video. It's a 4-minute. I'll just run fastest. So it would be like this. The video is working on and decoder is predicting in real time and decided to run. Yeah, this is simple, right? Yeah. It's not 100% correct, but yeah, in the end, showing what it can do. Yeah, that's it. That's it, guys.
This cross modality thing, I think one of the aspects that is more interesting. I mean, like, because like one thing, I don't know, text, how you're thinking, but then like, I don't know, this part of the video I thought was really, really, really amazing.
It's an interesting paper. I don't know. Yeah, in the end, I don't know. They published it recently for the full version, but I believe if this paper works out really well, I think they must be working with new GPT to work.
Yes.
To upgrade this. Yeah, it will be really fun to see in upcoming 6 months what this type of things combined with GPT could produce.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? Because it's like, at least this is the first paper of this
Yeah.
area that I read, and yeah, I think like of course the results are like it produces errors and stuff like that, but I think just the results that we got, it's so interesting, right? Just that gets close, like, so the data, they are able to get the data that they say that's incredibly noisy, and how it has the delay, right? The ball, like they say that it takes like some seconds to get the data. I think all of that, and they were able to get these interesting results. I think it's really like an area of research that I guess it would be very interesting. I think I think that's my conclusion for this paper, because I was already reading like I don't know, if you give some years maybe to improve, like we said before, right? The just things, right, for the diagnosis and understand how the brain works. I think it's really, really interesting.
The first thing that came to my mind because of this was like, yeah, just imagine this in neural link, what it can do. 2 papers on the line. Yeah. I don't think so. Like, if they are seeing this type of things, they want this. Yeah, it will be extremely interesting to see. Or maybe, a virus type of thing. Let's just say, imagine 10 years, we'll have some chip in brain, something like that. Virus, and yeah, you have all the thought process inside a PC right now. Scary, but a beautiful thing, I would say.
Yeah. Anyone wants to do some comment or continue the discussion?
I'll do a alternative comment here, but it's so crazy to think that like we may see a technological revolution to an extent that never happened in humanity's history, like way bigger than horses to cars. Maybe.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
Yeah, and maybe on our lifetime, right? Because it's getting
so fast.
It's so fast. Yeah, like the BERT, was 2018, and all these other stuff, language models. This one uses a model before BERT with GPT-1, and just the things that they were able to get from these readings, Yeah.
And Facebook also is doing a lot of research into understanding language within large language models, right? So, how to approximate human semantic comprehend, how to approximate large language models output to human semantic building. So, for example, putting on a longer horizon and just trying to, I don't know, I think we're going to be able to model the brain suit, which is going to be
I think
scary,
we tried with
CNN.
We tried CNN. When CNN or the neural networks came, like CNN was the upgrade version at the end, but yeah, and neural networks, the basic idea of neural network was to replicate the brain, right?
Yeah, but you're talking about, there's, for example, there are the new perceptrons that are coming out and people are trying out partial activation, and just honestly, if we can get billions of neurons, maybe we can do a brain,
There's this interesting thing that Geoffrey Hinton now is talking like loudly about AI and large language models, and he was saying that he used to think that backpropagation was the way that our brain used it to train, but currently he thinks that actually backpropagation is way better than what our brain does in terms of storing information in a system. So like he was saying, like, okay, if we have 1 trillion neurons here and we are capable of doing what we need 100 trillion neurons to do, maybe like, I mean, the implications of this would be that maybe our patterns can be easily read if you use understood like the patterns of brain activity using backpropagation, if it is a superior way of learning.
Yeah,
so
and also, you can finish, Ron.
No, it's so crazy. That's my final statement.
Yeah, but I also think like the paper also is interesting because they go into the test, right? Or how the it's like, can we pass to each subject and stuff like that? And one thing is that the brain, like one of the conclusions they had is like the brain, they divided the brain, like the analysis, and then they saw that there's a lot of it's well the word of it for like several, it's not, at least in this part, like it's not a specific brain area that does that. They have a lot of oh my god, the word, it's like the cloud systems. They have the repeat
clusters.
The oh my god, they have like, is like if one area of the brain don't work,
redundancies,
like
you mean?
Redundancy, yeah. I mean, yeah, thanks. Redundancy. They have a lot of redundancy in the brain as well. So I think also, yeah, interesting. This
Redundancy, but the brain actually works to reroute some pathways.
Yes,
it's not just, oh, it was already there. It's like, oh, this pathway doesn't work anymore.
Yes.
Let's make a new one.
Yeah, and also I think it's also because that thing of neuroplasticity, right? That like if you have something bad happen to you, like if you're a kid, it's better because then the brain has time, to readapt. And then if you're older, maybe like you have some issues for life and stuff like that, right? So that's this thing as well, right? Because it's not a finished product like the brain and other parts of our body, right? Like it cannot readapt given new circumstances.
Constantly changing the architecture.
Yeah.
And the training data is very noisy too.
Yes.
But one thing that I'm starting is like a random thought, not much experiments behind it, but maybe biological brains will be easier to understand, like their behavior, than artificial brains. Like, I don't know, this is one of the things that I've been thinking, like, we care a lot that we can't understand what's going on inside of artificial neural networks, but maybe the biological brains are easier to understand.
Yeah, I think works like this is like the start of this, right? The information, right? How can you get the information?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still at a point where philosophy is doing most of the work in terms of what is consciousness, where does consciousness actually come from, right? So we're still in a very we don't understand a thing, honestly, at this point.
And
the more we learn, the less we understand.
I can see this being applied. Maybe something of this kind could be even used to try to understand the internal thoughts of a neural network. If you do something along the lines that we are doing in this paper, but with the neurons that are being activated inside of a neural network, maybe we could get something interesting too, like internal thought process.
The problem is that, like, a neural network has a lot less priors in terms of the organization, right? A neural network, it's not functional. You don't have a section of the neural network that is dedicated to speech, and another to vision, another one to spatial representation. So the architecture is completely different. And at the same time, like the human brain, we kind of have something similar to layers in particular portions of the brain for particular tasks. The concept of layer is completely different. So
yes.
I mean, I'm not crazy about those analogies between neural networks and the brain, because they are very loosely inspired. The unit is very loosely inspired on a neuron, and the architecture is like not related at all with the architecture of a human brain.
I agree.
Yeah, but one thing that on this tangent that I think was very interesting as well, on they're doing like their test, like the cross modality and stuff like that, there is a part that they have like the attention. They test the attention, right? So they have like the subject to hear like two stories at the same time, one from a woman, another from a man, and then they ask the subject, oh, pay attention to the story that man is talking, ignore the woman. And then they were able to see that the reconstruction that they do on the brain, they were able to reconstruct better, from the person that they were like, oh, pay attention to this person. And I think it's interesting because we have all the neural networks, not the neural networks, but the transformer base that have the concept of attention. Of course, it's just the name that the guys gave to this concept, right? But I think it was interesting, like this part of the brain already, right? Because maybe the data got into the brain, but the subject, like his attention was able to get maybe more blood flow and stuff like that to activate more the parts that to pay attention to the story that he was asked to. Oh, pay attention to the woman, pay attention to the man. And is that thing I think I thought is interesting, right? Because like now large language models say, oh, the attention, which is, I guess, it's not a bad name. It's a good name. Like, because like, oh, which words we weight more, which words this word relates to. So it's kind of similar to attention. But I thought it was interesting when I was reading the paper, like, oh, now this is the real attention, and it works, right? And I thought like, because also we have these other things that the concepts, right? Neural networks is like the structure, it's loosely based on the brain, but also attention, is another thing that I don't know if you understand how that works, but in this work, like it was able to decode better, just thought it's another thing that we have the word, but it's not exactly the same, but it kind of does what we think it does.
Even if we're anthropomorphized, even if you're basing it on humans and basing it on just saying that, oh, it's attention, oh, it's a neural network because it resembles, even though the architecture is completely different, the inspiration is still there, right? So even though there are some people who, yes, believe that there should be no connection, we should completely dissociate brains from computer science and machine learning, and in order to advance, there are others that still try to get inspired by brains. And for example, if you're thinking about attention, if you're thinking about new perceptrons, it's just has the potential to be revolutionary, right?
Yeah, but I think it's a different area, right? We have an area like bio-inspired, computation and stuff like that. I think this area is kind of, I don't think it, like today, the neural networks is kind of like that. Like we have this structure, but, we like for the improvements, at least the works that I read, you're not like, oh, we are looking into the brain, stuff like that. We have an area like for bioinformatics that does look into that. But I think for today, like, I mean, like transformers, for example, like the guys didn't look into the brain at all. I think like they just like tried to come up with the concept, like it was for translation originally. So like the idea is like, oh, some words, we know the translation for this word, but sometimes we have to look into the gender of the thing. So like, oh, so maybe let's try to build this architecture, which was the transformer. So have the attention and stuff like that. So I think maybe, I don't know, I think it's a different area, like this bio-inspired for now. I think like it was just the seed that say, oh, we had neural networks, and the name is stuck. At least that's what I think.
Yeah, we're using a neuron model from like what, the 70s, 60s. It's quite an old model that we're using, right, of perceptron. And we have discovered that, for example, actual neurons are a lot more complex over the years. So maybe at some point we could create a perceptron more inspired by current neurons if we have the computational capacity,
Yeah, I think, I know that there's this area of study, but I never read anything like I don't know the current state of the art for this part. The guys that really, the biologists that really look into that and see how we can replicate. But yeah, for sure there is an area of study.
Yeah, I believe that 1 or 2 years back they discovered that a single neuron could perform a sharp operation, which wouldn't be possible in theory. But I believe that, like, if we follow with the current paradigm, it would be like increasing the number of neurons would solve this anyway. But yeah, one thing I was thinking, and I don't want to extend a lot the discussion, but it would be crazy when we go from reading to writing in the brain. So when we get a neural link of sorts, and we can stimulate the areas that we know that, for example, this may really turn someone like that is blind to see, like by stimulating the right areas in the brain. Like,
we tried this already, right? Shock therapy.
Yeah,
I think
thinking about lobotomizing people.
Some things that actually do the sight thing. They actually do stimulate the right parts of the brain. I was reading this thing the other day about it's this camera that blind people were wearing for a study that actually stimulated parts of their brain because they had this very specific kind of blindness. So they just started seeing again, at least shapes and forms and just the basics, whereas they were seeing nothing before. It became these kind of new eyes, even though they were quite simple. So people are working on that, and it's honestly kind of amazing.
Yeah. And also had that work, right? I don't know, I don't have the link. And that work that I think it was a Japanese university that they gave the subjects something to see, and then like they were able to reconstruct a image that was kind of similar, right? So I think it's
crazy.
Yeah, I think this is crazy. But yeah, I think there's lots of applications. I mean, it can be very good applications, it can be very bad applications. You know, like you show an image of a person, I don't know, like you have like your 1984 dictatorship, and then you have like you show the image of the Big Brother to someone that is a suspect criminal of wrong thought, and they're like, no, think about some stuff, and they're like, the guy is thinking, and they're like, oh no, this guy is bad. I don't know. I say like, oh yeah, you're arrested for wrong thought, you'll be tortured and stuff like that. But I do think like maybe we shouldn't look into this if it is this with this perspective. I think like the perspective of diagnosis of people, right? Stuff like all the diseases and how people look into different stuff. I think that's the area that I think we should think more about it. And this work shows like how maybe we can, future work can really improve this. And again, like they said, like is fMRI. I'm not familiar with that, but it's not something that the guys have to cut your hair and put the electrode. It's something that is non-invasive. So I think that's also very interesting because it's easier as well. Of course, MRI is not the easy part, but regarding the body of the person, it maybe is applicable to several subjects.
They actually use another version of like MRI. It's known as bold fMRI. It's a full form is blood oxygen level dependent imagining. So it's a more complex form of that. fMRI won't produce it. They use a bold fMRI. So yeah, it's interesting that it generally goes for that magnetic very frequencies in blood oxygen, something like that. So yeah, it's getting data is also very difficult in this case, I would say. Okay. Yeah.
It aligns the atoms and looks at the charges in different densities to create tissue imaging. It's really cool.
Let's comment from my part is that I don't know what will be from the future, but one thing I'm sure is that when like scanning people's brain activity become a norm, this data will be collected.
Yeah.
And this scares me a bit.
Yes. Yeah. That like will be collected, and then like I don't know, hackers like into the brain, and I don't know, they hack the hospital.
Yeah, data leak is like, oh shit.
Yeah, and then then you have like that thing, right? Fleury, like the rate of diagnosis, like they are hacked again. Like who knows, like the impact now.
No, I mean, imagine if we have to, instead of using tap shields for our cards, we have to walk around in tinfoil hats. The conspiracy theorists were right all along.
Yeah, they were right all along. Yeah.
Everyone will be that Magneto one, right?
That was fun. Okay.